What's up, Liron here, and today we're gonna learn how to create a sense of depth in landscape painting. Now, before we get started, I have an important message for you. This is something I've been talking about for a while now. I've been working on a book on how to sketch people in a fun, intuitive, and accurate method, okay? I think this is gonna be one of the best books out there on how to draw and sketch people. It's gonna be out in the next 2 months or so, and I'm gonna constantly bug you about it for, I think, from this point on until the book is out in every single video, okay? It would mean the world to me if you will go to Amazon and buy it. I will let you know as soon as I have a link there. It's still not published. I may put it up for pre-sale, but I'm gonna remind you of this in every single video probably from this point until the book is out. I think it's really gonna be one of the best. Now, with that being said, let's get started with today's video, okay? And again, I want to talk about creating depth in landscape painting. Now, the reference is a picture I took when I was with friends in a natural reserve here in Israel. By the way, sorry about the weird light. It's very moody, very gloomy today. I promise the actual drawing and painting process are going to be with really high quality. It's just this room has a bit of a yellow light to it because of the darkness from outside. So in any case, I took this picture and I think it's perfect for conveying depth in a landscape painting. There's a bit of a road there, a few trees, and then the background with mountains. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful reference that I feel so lucky to take a picture of. Now, another advantage of this kind of landscape, and you can see some of the studies I made here behind, but I'm going to probably put it somewhere here so you can better see it. One of the advantages of these kinds of scenes is that it's actually easier even if you don't know how to draw, because trees are very organic shapes. You don't need to draw people. I didn't even put people in this scene. You don't need to know too much perspective, just the basics. So it's very good if drawing is something that challenges you. So I think you're going to really enjoy this one. So what we're going to do is first I'm going to show you all of the studies I made of this up close, and then we're going to do the drawing, then we're going to do the painting, and I'm going to remove hopefully the tape, and you'll see the final result is going to be beautiful. Okay, so with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, I want to show you some of the studies that I did for this one. I'm gonna put here the original photo, which I think is a very good reference material because it does show the depth in a very clear and beautiful way. In fact, I'm gonna make sure it has enough room. And so these are the preparatory sketch I did, and you probably remember these sketches from this sketch from earlier. This is a new one. As you can see here, this is the very first sketch I did. Now with these small ones, and you can see compared to my finger, it's really small. What I'm trying to achieve is just a general sense of composition. It's not even necessarily values or stuff like that. It's more about the composition with these kinds of studies. And with these larger studies, it's more about the values and where I place everything, okay? And on a more accurate level. Now what I want to do is zoom in a bit on those. We're going to get rid of the reference for now, and I want to show you what I did. Okay, so hopefully now you have a better view at these. This is the first one I did, as I mentioned. My main focus here was trying to figure out where the trees are going to be, where the road is going to be, which is very hinted here. You can barely see the road. And also how I'm going to layer those on top of the more horizontal shapes. So we have horizontal shapes, we have vertical shapes. The next one I did, which is a little larger, this one, here I really wanted to test out different arrangements of values. So I tried the background to see how light it should be against the trees. If you notice, actually, this tree here at the back has contrasts that are darker than the background and also lighter because it has a lot of light spots where the leaves sort of reflect the light that hits them. It was a very interesting day, very interesting light and shadow situation. So these are the two preparatory sketches that I did. In addition to those, I also did a few paintings. So here's the very first attempt that I did of this. And you can see here, by the way, the cars that I did as a preparation and the road here that I showed you, another tutorial. So here, my main concern was how the technique is gonna accompany this kind of a painting. And the technique is always meant to support your vision, okay? The technique is not in the forefront. The vision is what's more important. And even if your technique isn't as good, with a very good vision, you can execute a very beautiful painting. So this is the first attempt. It was okay, not perfect, but then I went ahead and did that one, which is a little more accurate and a little more of what I'm looking for. And this is what I'll be showing you how to do. Okay, so I have a fresh area here to work on. and I'm gonna recreate this and show you the exact process leading to this. Now, I did use a bit of white paint here, white gel pen, but generally speaking, I won't be using it. I still left, these highlights were naturally left in. I'm gonna hold it up so you can see. And some of the rest details were done with the white gel pen, but we don't need that. You don't have to have it. I think this is the best sketch I got so far. So with that being said, we can now move on to the actual drawing process, and then we're gonna also paint this. Now, just I wanted to remind you, there are timestamps in the description box below, so you can skip every part of this video. If you want to skip to the painting part, skip to the whatever it is you want to see, you can use that as a table of contents. So with that being said, let's get started with the drawing and painting of this. Okay, so we'll get started now with the drawing process, and as I'm looking at this once again after making all of these studies, I'm starting to get a sense of what I want to achieve with this scene, and so I'll probably do some things differently. Now, I measured from the edge, and where the kind of far away mountains are about this area, and they kind of end at the same height here with a bit of variation. So I'm going to place those in first. So here we go, just some very loose kind of mountainy ridge. These aren't tall mountains, it's just low hanging, just for us to have a nice background setting. Now, for the road, it's gonna be somewhere around here, okay? And I literally just measured, but you can measure on your reference. You can hold up the pencil if you're actually there, and it's gonna end around here. So I'm gonna place this line, and I really wanna make sure this one's parallel to the bottom, because that'll affect the way this ends up looking, okay? What I think I'm going to do with this version is make this background a little lighter. That's actually one of the main things I think I'll change with this attempt, or with this variation. So now, we have this. This is about a third. The edge of the road is about a third of this distance, so I'm marking it up here. And now, something interesting happens here. The road kind of goes down like that with an almost vertical line, and then it merges here. Now, it can be a little misleading, but it seems like these two parts are the same length, okay? So we actually have here two lines that are of the same length, something like that. This line may be a bit of a gentler curve. Okay, and I'm barely gonna erase here. I'll try to keep it to a minimum. Now, the edge of the road is here, okay? This is the only usage of perspective we're gonna have here. Now, interestingly enough, the edge of the road, the right side of the road, is in the middle, in the dead center of this. So it's around here, the dead center of this line. And this gives you a better idea of how I establish it, how I measure and stuff like that. Now, so here's the edge of the road. Now, we have this little curve here that I wanted to indicate, because there is a bit of a hillside here. Now, this comes all the way, and I'll say it's about a third of this distance. Okay, so a third will be somewhere around here. So this is where I'm going to place it. Now I'm going to come around with my hand and draw this kind of line. Now it has a bit of a break around here, and this is in fact where the main tree is going to be. So now we established the main details of the road. Now here we're gonna have the tree. So I'm gonna just place a symbol for it, something like this. Now for drawing the shape of the tree, I love the way it looks in the reference, so I want to preserve that. So what I'm gonna do is follow the edges of the picture to figure out where to place the trees. Okay, so it starts here with the tree trunk. And then the actual body of the tree, the part with all the foliage, is here. Now it kind of cuts through this line and gets close to this edge, kind of like that. But then it has this weird break in shape, okay? And this is all we are gonna need to get the shape of the tree going. It's something like that. And this is just the front tree. There are a few trees here at the back. Now, if you notice carefully and you follow the actual shape of that tree, it kind of moves upwards like this. It's a bit of a weird shape. We have some of the tree trunk is visible through here, and then it kind of hangs low like that. And I want to mark the way it hangs low. So it hangs low like this and comes back all the way to the top, and it kind of goes beyond that edge, okay? So something like this. This is the tree at the front. I want to draw the two tree trunks, so I'm just going to place them in like that. and they are gonna have some interesting highlights. So this is highlight number 1, and this will be highlight number 2, okay? These I need to make sure I avoid painting over, but those are the main highlights here. Now we have some more trees here at the background coming out of this spot, and with this one it partially covers this mountain ridge, and then it goes back and it kind of connects to this tree here, okay? And I'm really looking at the negative shape, this space, in fact. This is the space I'm looking for to complete the shape of the trees. Now I see I'm low on space on the camera, so I'll soon take a break and just pause it. Now I'm gonna put a few tree trunks here, just like that. Some hints for me to work with later on. We actually have a sign here that I'm not sure I'll include, but I may include it. I'm gonna place it here. Now here from this tree we have a lot of dark foliage that I want to indicate because it is important. Then it comes over here. I'm just following the shapes that I see. Then it goes up like that. And here in the background we have an even taller hanging kind of shrubbery or foliage that crosses this line that I'm gonna make a little lower, okay, just to have that kind of interesting dynamic. This I can erase because it's gonna be invisible mostly. Now we have that tree on the left side. So this tree kind of casts a shadow, or it's this one, I'm not sure, but there is a shadow on the road here, and this connects to the tree on this side. Now this tree is really a big mess. I'm gonna indicate it very loosely and lightly, kind of like that, but the main trunk is here. And here we have some foliage in the foreground closer to us that come out of this side. And this is all just one big pile of foliage, all the left, okay? It's just a big mess. And we're gonna have to deal with it in just a few moments, okay? So this, believe it or not, establishes almost everything we need. I just want to get this kind of a hill thing going from down there because it is here and it does have a few details here. Maybe it's kind of poles or stumps or something there, and we have a bit of a shadow at the bottom of this part of the road. We have this cast shadow over here. It's kind of looming all over the road, and this is pretty much enough to get us going. So with that, I'm gonna rearrange some stuff, bring the watercolor palette and all of those stuff, and we're gonna get started on painting this. Okay, so we're gonna get started in just a minute, and maybe you can hear the noises of the rain from outside. This is a really gloomy day today, and funny enough, the clouds create a nice, interesting dispersed light, so I actually like the way this video is gonna look. Now, let's talk about strategy before we get started. The sky, and I'm trying again to simplify this, the sky is almost white. There's no reason whatsoever to paint it. This tree and the trees in general are very dark, so I'm gonna try and do them in kind of a black. The background here is fairly light, okay? So we're gonna try and keep it light. And the road is kind of similar to, all of this is one big value, excluding the shadow here. So my plan will be to cover everything up, and then I'm gonna go back and cover again the trees and all sorts of things like that. Okay, now I wanted originally to do this black and white, but it seems a bit boring after rethinking and reconsidering it. So what I think I'll do instead is use color, but because I do want to create some depth using the colors I'll be using, okay? So we're going to start with a bit of a gray color, and I think I'm going to use my French ultramarine here. I'm going to do some experimentation with the colors and use some very random colors and see what the result may be. Okay, so I'm putting a bit of French ultramarine, a bit of carbazole violet, a bit of undersea green, a bit of quinacridone burnt orange. I'm just putting a lot of paints together here to create this gray. And this is a very important stage because I want to make sure that first off I have enough paint to work with, and second that it's kind of what I'm looking for. Now I'm gonna start, funny enough, with this. I'm gonna do it a little differently than when I first practiced. I'm gonna start with this background here because it's gonna be rather gray and muted. Now I'm gonna switch back and start establishing some stronger or more interesting greens for the trees here that are more at the front, as you can see. We're gonna come back later with another wash and try and make them a little happier, let's say, but I'm gonna need a lot of yellow now. Okay, I kind of just need more yellow, and I'm just filling everything up. Now what's important with trees, and it's more important than you would think, is to actually leave some gaps. Because when you leave these gaps, it creates this beautiful, interesting effect of the sky shining through the tree. So this is what I'm trying to do here. And aside from really and I'm going to use a lot of yellow at the top here, I'm going to have all of my tools and color choices and everything in the description box below. So here we've got the shape of the tree, and I'm going to come back again with another wash and reestablish some of these. But again, the main part here that we want to make sure is that we negative paint around the highlights, like I'm gonna do just now, and leave some of these tree trunks showing. Okay, I'm gonna go over this. Now the only highlights I really have to worry about are those under this tree right over here with these two tree trunks, so I'm getting rid of these fast. Now I'm gonna go back to the left side just to make sure I don't completely lose that edge. I'm gonna pull it all the way to here. Here it's going to be darker, so I can kind of do whatever I want. Make this tree trunk smaller. And this is really experimentation for me. This is not how I originally did the practice session. Here it's gray again, but now I want to turn it into a much more vibrant and happy color. So again, more French ultramarine, more of this green, maybe a bit of phthalo blue just to have a bit more happiness to it. And that's how I'm going to establish these shapes that are closer to us. And of course, we're going to go over everything again and make it a little lighter, a little darker in some parts, and so on. So we're not done here, and we're going to do a lot of dry brushing in the next few stages. The trees here on the left can get a little more blue, maybe, just to create this interesting focal point around this area. Like so, like this, a lot of gaps. I'm leaving a lot of gaps. I don't know if they'll amount to anything, but I'm just trying here. Now, I'm putting a bit of yellow, and you can't see me mix. It's over there, but hopefully that'll make sense. And again, I don't know exactly how this one will turn out, but hopefully it will produce something nice. But again, this is me experimenting, because this is not how I originally did it. I have to confess. So you'll have to forgive me if the result is anything less than stunning, which it'll probably be. Now, while it's still wet, I can start establishing some very gentle shadows, maybe around here. This tree trunk should be darker. This entire section, in fact, should be a little darker here. Like this. We'll have more opportunities to do that in just a few moments, and I'm not touching this because this has already started to dry. Now the shadow on the road, I want it to be a little more striking, so I'm not going to touch that a lot, just a bit. And here we have a few kind of branches that are cutting up these shapes, so it's not a perfect highlight here as well. Like this, like that. Kind of add a bit of interest to the highlight. And with that, funny enough, we're done with the first wash. Now this now looks like nothing, okay? But rest assured, as soon as we'll start adding some more shadows, it will look like something. Let me zoom in just so you can see some more of the details. Okay, so here we go. Now you can better see everything we did here. I'm just going to close off some of these gaps. They seem a little redundant. But in any case, this may look like nothing right now, but as soon as we'll start adding the real heavy dark shadows, it will definitely look like something. Okay, so don't worry about it. And also don't worry about the shapes of the trees. We're going to better indicate those later on as soon as we start adding some more dark shadows. I'm going to do it with a smaller brush, so the dry brush will actually have some kind of effect, but I did want to avoid using this small brush for this stage just to make sure that the wash doesn't dry on me. Okay, so we're gonna let it dry for a while and come back and continue. Okay, so this is now fully dry and it's time for a strategic talk. So the way to create interest in this kind of scene is to really layer the dark trees on top of the lighter background. But there is one thing I noticed, and that is this part in the background should be a little darker than this road and this hill, and it will create some interest. So what I want to do is very gently add a very soft glaze to that background and make it just a tad bit darker. Now it's going to be pretty much gray because still I want it to stay there in the background and not take too much attention. So I'm just mixing some of my primary colors here, making sure to keep things relatively muted. I'm gonna increase the blueness maybe with this one. I'm gonna start putting it in here. And I will add something important in just a moment, okay? So if this was, you know what, I'm gonna talk about it now. If this was a different layered scene, I would have probably approached this stage a little differently. What I would have done is put in the dark trees, and then based on those I would figure out if I need to darken this part of the background. The problem is I don't want to darken it later on because the tree is already going to be draping over it. So I don't want to reawaken the paint or anything like that. So this is why I actually do this now. Okay, not later, but now. I'm going to do this like that. Kind of negative paint around the foliage around this area here. So that'll leave a bit of a highlight. And now, I don't know if it better creates that sense of depth, but hopefully it sent it a bit to the background. Now this may seem a little too dark now, but as soon as we're going to drape the trees over, it's going to look much better. Now with this, I can already start placing in some of these shadows underneath, like that, just to indicate some of them. Not to overdo it, but I'm going to make some of these a little stronger. And we're pretty much done with this stage. I'm going to allow this like a few moments to dry and then come back. But maybe before we do that, I'm going to better indicate this hill in the background. I kind of missed that, and this shape really is important to create the interest we want. So it should be a little more hill-like. Add a bit more paint. And now you see me doing these corrections on the fly. Hopefully I don't ruin the evenness of the wash too much. But in any case, now we can let it dry for a few moments and come back, and you're gonna see it's gonna be beautiful. Okay, so now this is fully dry and I can start draping over the trees. Now, I'm gonna need a lot of paint to get these to be as dark as I want. This tree and in the most foreground is almost black. This part is also almost black. There's a lot of very dark areas in the trees, so I'm gonna be taking my time with establishing these darks properly. I may need the assistance of some carbazole violet here, and I don't mind the color as much because it's gonna be so dark. It's gonna have a hint of ultramarine and some yellow, but nothing too strong. It's gonna be, again, almost black. Now I'm using a smaller brush because with that I can better bring out the dry brush effect, like so. And then you get these interesting patterns in the foliage. Now this is really where we're going to create that differentiation between these two trees, the front one and the one more at the back. You're going to need a lot of paint for this, trust me, because the more you're going to have, and I'm going to try and leave some gaps, but the more you'll have this, as soon as you have just a bit of water here, sorry about my poor verbal skills as I paint, but as soon as you're gonna have just even a little bit of water here, it may ruin the quality of the darkness that it's gonna need later on. So now I'm placing that in. I'm gonna try and leave that gap open, but maybe indicate just like a branch or something like that. Now this is where the really interesting part comes, I think. And it's gonna be where I'm gonna start draping some of this tree over the top there, but there are a few heavy shadows in the farther tree that I want to get some of here, like this, because it's also got a few very dark shadows. Now I'm gonna wet the brush just a little bit, just to get the paint moving again. Sometimes you have to add just a bit more water, even if you want it to be completely black. And now I'm starting to drape this tree on top of that dark background, and hopefully that'll create the effect we're after. Now I'm gonna connect this over here. We have some very deep and strong shadows, so I'm just connecting them and painting them the way I see them, actually, just the way I see the shapes. So this is a little darker. Here we have this dark shape that continues all the way to the bottom. If you remember, I drew it earlier on. And this is the most challenging wash, I would say, because here you really have to merge all of the shapes that you can to get this to look unified, even, good. I'm gonna add a bit more yellow to it. Now we're getting to some really dry brush, so I've added just a bit of water to help it flow a little better. I'm gonna place these foliage here. And then there's a shadow cast probably by this tree over there. And this entire hill is much darker. And it's much darker than the background, so it is important to get that right. I'm going to charge it with some more paint just to make sure that it's really black. Now here, I'm going to use a bit of a wetter and less dark of a wash just to indicate some of these shadows here in the background, like this. I want to cut the shape of the highlights to make sure they aren't as striking as maybe I did them here. Like this. And now here's something interesting. We have this break in the hill of the trees, kind of like that. The sign I'm going to completely ignore. We won't be needing that. And we have this shadow here. And we have just some very gentle shadows along the bottom part of this kind of thing. Now I'm going to connect the shadow again on the road here with the left section of the painting, like this. It's going to go up a little bit, connecting to the hill, as you can see here, like so, and it really gives the feeling that it changes its direction depending on where it is. So now it connects to this tree trunk that's going to be very dark as well. And now here I have to work together, I have to keep working, because otherwise the wash is going to dry, some bad things will happen. So I'm continuing, moving along here. There are a few kind of stray foliage here, a bit of that right over here, this shape kind of thing, this connects here. Now here we have to work a little fast because I don't want the wash to dry, but honestly all we need is to get that dark, almost black quality to it as much as possible. There are some very deep shadows on this side of the painting, and then we have a lot of stray leaves coming out of this side, kind of draping over like that. Gotta make sure that they're as dark as they can. And notice how I barely care about the colors anymore. I'm just putting in darks. Drape this over the background. Now here, there's another important part, which is the shadowy area at the bottom of this tree that's gonna also drape over this in the background. And the reason why this is challenging with watercolor, more than with pencil, let's say, is with pencil you can kind of render it very carefully and make sure everything's in the right spot. With paint, you kind of have to get it right the first time. You don't have a lot of opportunities to build things up slowly. So now we're going to move on to this left section. I'm going to switch to my synthetic Princeton brush, size 12. Don't know the exact series of this one, or if it has a more unique name, but this is what it looks like. And then I'm going to cover up all of this left section. But I have to be really careful here, because here you have to balance the way the actual picture looks with composition. So I don't necessarily want to place a strong contrast around the edges so that I don't detract attention from the main point of interest, if that makes sense. But I do want it to be as dark as it should be. Okay, so you always kind of balance these two things out. And also there's a lot of abstraction here, and you like abstract, it's all abstract, and you kind of have to believe it will end up working even though you don't draw anything in particular really. So now I'm putting in some stray tree branches here and there, kind of like this. Hopefully that'll all make sense when you look at it from afar, finally, when it's all said and done. And now there is a bit of a shadow coming all through here, but it's a bit lighter. So I'm removing some of the excess paint off of the brush. Now I need a lot of control, so I'm holding it quite close to the tip. We have this bit of shadow here coming out of this foliage, kind of like that. And I think this is it for this left section. I don't want to overdo that. Now I'm going to use a bit of yellow and more red to indicate the shadows on the road here. I'm going to try at least. That'll put everything in the right context. I need more yellow and red just to keep it a little more towards the orange side. And I'm just placing in these shadows. They may seem a little too dark now, but they will be lighter, especially compared to this dark shadow that I put in with much more concentrated pigment, so you don't have to worry about that too much. A few stray highlights here and there. And I think we're almost done here. I'm consulting the other version that I did, trying to figure out if something needs to be a little different. I think darkening this part may have been a mistake, so I could try and lift some of that and demonstrate that, but I think I won't. I think I'm going to leave it that way, and hopefully it makes sense. Now I'm going to add a bit of darks to the bottoms of the trees. I feel like this part isn't quite dark enough. Maybe a bit of red will do the trick. Kind of like this. And I may kill off some of the highlights in the very distance. They feel a little too strong for something this farther away. So I'm just going to do this and that. Now this sends them into the background. This is way too strong. Got rid of that. Now this puts these highlights in a better context, I believe. They just look a little better. Now another part I need to darken just a little bit, I would say, is this tree here. I'm gonna need much darker, more concentrated paint to do this, so I'm gonna place that shadow in. Actually, I missed it completely. It should connect completely to this shadow here, like this. I'm gonna use this opportunity to darken this shadow a little more, like so. And this connects to that, and here we have all these darker shadows, and hopefully that works out. That ends up looking like something. Now I'm gonna let it dry for a few moments and then come back and figure out if any more highlights are necessary or any changes. In fact, I already noticed something that requires improvement, and that is the shape of the tree around the top. So I'm gonna just add these here. I think this will improve its look, like this. Just the overall shape. Now it looks rounder, it gives it a little more of a realistic feeling to it. And I think this is pretty much done. I'm gonna allow this a few more moments. Okay, so there are two things I would like to try out. One is to make these two highlights a little thinner. They feel a little too thick, which hurts the feeling of realism, I guess. So I'm gonna just make these a little smaller and thinner. So that's the first one. For the second one, I have to be, again, really careful here, like this. Now this may feel a little more like a tree branch. And there was another thing. I want to try and take a risk and actually try and pick back up some of the paint here. So what I'm gonna do is, it's gonna be a good demo, even if it fails. So I'm gonna wet this area just a bit. I'm gonna use the synthetic brush to do that, actually. I have to be a little fast, I took my time. But I'm wiping it completely on the towel, and then I use it to pick up some of the paint, pull back on it, and make it a little lighter. Now I can come back with a tissue and pick some of that up. And you can see it made it a little lighter. Now it actually has to be a little lighter near the top specifically. So I'm gonna grab some of that paint, wipe it completely on the towel, come back, pick it up, come back with the paper and pick it up. Now we're good. I think this is good enough. I don't want to mess around with it too much, but hopefully you get the feeling. Now I'm gonna again strengthen, because it always seems like it needs some strengthening, this area just a bit. Drape it over like so that it has more of that feeling in it. And same for the right part. Gonna do that as well here. Just hanging a little lower because it is happening in the original reference, like this. And now I think we're pretty much done. I'm gonna allow this to dry and then come back and add just a few highlights with my white pen. Okay, so I'm gonna have to annoy you just a little bit. I'm not pleased with the way this I lightened this up, so I'm gonna push it back to be a little darker, unfortunately for us. So I'm gonna make it just a little bit, and I have to be careful again. I don't recommend doing this, but because I feel like this will improve the final vision, I am doing it regardless. And here we go, and this is done. It's as dark as it should get, because it does create a better separation between the two. Now, another final touch that I realized I have to put in here is actually this shadow should be darker, okay? I used very watered down paint to do that, but it actually needs to be a little more distinct from the ground, okay? So when you compare it to the ground, and it has to connect to this shadow as well, these here should be just a little bit darker and better visible. So like this, like that. And I think now we're done with this, and we can finally start adding some highlights with my white pen. And I think I will, in fact, add some highlights to these trees in the background. I decided it's worth it, so one here. Maybe one moving in that opposing direction. I'm just making the pen work like this. Now what's funny is, and I'm gonna have to wait just a bit for this to dry, is there are a few highlights. I can actually start working on it here in this tree in the background, because of the way light hits it. We also have a lot of these highlights around here. Now I don't want to overdo it, so I'll just kind of suggest it in a few single strokes like that here as well. This is a bit wet, this part, so I don't want to touch it too much. But there are a few small details like that here. And here we have a lot of leaves that kind of reflect a lot of shiny light. So I'm just putting in some of these just to better indicate that kind of an effect. And aside from that, I think we are done here. Maybe I'll just add a few more stray highlights showing the, the sky through the tree, so you can imagine that this is the sky. Because I did lose some of those here, quite a lot of leaves here, and that's it, I think, anymore, and I'll be overdoing it. So I'm gonna sign this now. I hope you enjoyed this process and seeing me kind of struggle, and I did a lot of studies of this scene, and still it's a bit of a challenge sometimes. I think it could be interesting to maybe revisit it in about 6 months, which is about the time frame it takes me to usually feel like I hit a new level in my skill. So I think it will be useful. And notice how much time it takes for me to mix the right amount on this kind of a brush. But in any case, I think it will be nice to revisit this scene and try to get a bit of a more let's say realistic impression, or maybe the impression is realistic. It's a bit hard for me to sometimes see, and I need to take a look at it one day later, and then I can better realize what I did and how it turned out. But I'm going to show you, I was very confident with the previous studies that I made. This one really, I think, conveys a sense of realism, especially from afar. So I don't know if it's just me or this really has some stuff that require attention, but I do think overall it does convey the necessary message, and definitely it's interesting compositionally. I think the way the trees drape over, and the vertical road and the horizontal road and the vertical trees, I think it works really well. As always, I forgot that I want to remove the tape as well, but before we do that, I just noticed that, and I have to do this over again, there's just a lot more unity in the darks. Okay, so there are less gaps in some areas, like here, you don't need that. Here, this is one big lump of black, really. And I wanted to convey that authentically, so I'm killing off some of the highlights with this tree, and now we're officially done. I want to remove the tape. It's not going to have a strong influence on the sky area for sure, because with that area I didn't do anything, but it will affect the rest. So removing this part here. Finally, a bit of a cleaner edge. Removing the bottom part. This is where it makes the most difference. And finally removing this left part right over here, and the top area. And we are done with this one. Again, I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for taking so long to wrap this video up, but every time I recognize there's something to improve, I kind of have to do that because hopefully that'll achieve a better result and that'll teach you more. So with that being said, we can truly wrap up this video. So this is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, at the very least, seeing me struggle a bit. One last thing I kind of want to note is that one of the things I think that make this impression a little better is the values are a little bit more on point. Now this line should be perfectly vertical, and here I got it a little diagonal. So I don't know again if it's just me, but I'll probably look at this one tomorrow and be like, oh, it looks pretty good. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed this, and again, hearing me talk, listening to the things I try to notice in the scene. Hopefully that at least gives you an idea to how I approach things, maybe how to, in what order to paint. You know, should I start with the background or the trees? Like in this example, there really is no background. There's no reason to cover everything up just to tick a box that you did it. You know, it doesn't make any sense. So in that sense, I hope you enjoy this. Again, a scene that's very good if you aren't that experienced in drawing, because you don't have to know how to draw. I will try, and I may forget, and you will remind me in a comment down below to include the original reference photo if you want to paint based on that and have it in large size. I will upload it to my website and then send a link over there, so hopefully you can get that. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I want to remind you before we wrap up this video just to have a mental note about my Sketching People book. If you're interested in sketching people, I'm telling you, it's going to be one of the best books out there on sketching people, from whether it's from real life or photo reference. It's going to combine both having a fun process and producing an accurate result. Okay, it's something that is really important, and I see all books do either that, or it's either super boring and anatomical, or it's very loose, but the result isn't really there. It doesn't teach you too much about the technique. So I'm gonna have the best of both worlds, hopefully. So I wanna thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and comment down below. It really helps to spread the word out and to attract more people to view the video. What else? Subscribe, hit the bell button to receive notifications. Thank you so much, and I will see you again in another one real soon.